So you want to invest in property, but you don't know where to find the money. Well, in this video, I'm going to be showing you every way that I know that you can fund your properties. Financing is one of the most crucial parts of investing, and getting it right can make all the difference. Step one, let's start with the obvious ones, buy-to-let mortgages. So you've got a boring vanilla buy-to-let property. How do mortgages work? Well, first of all, what is a mortgage? Well, technically it stands for death pledge, but let's move away from that. It's long-term financing, okay? So when you think about financing, you can think long-term, medium-term, and short-term. And in general, the more debt there is, the more long-term, the more equity loan there is, the more short-term. And I'll explain what both of those mean. So with a buy-to-let, you typically will put in a 25% deposit. And this is on a buy-to-let mortgage. Now, this is really important because a lot of people, if you bought your own home, maybe you put 10% down. With buy-to-let or investment purchases, typically the minimum you're going to put down is 25%. The reason I say typically is sometimes you could put 20%, but you're not getting access to it as a brand new individual. And if you're watching this video, you're probably new to property. So 25% deposit, which means you can get 75% debt. And this is really important because you're using other people's money to put into the property. And this is something that always really excites me, is that when you buy a property, one of the biggest assets or benefits of owning a property is capital growth, which is the value of the property going up every single year. Now, does it go up every year? No, but in general, every 10 to 12 years, the property will double in value. And you get 100% of the benefit, despite the fact that you only put 25% in and 75% comes from somebody else, which in this case is the bank or mortgage lender. So the other key benefit is that actually it's incredibly low rates. So at the moment, it's 5 to 6%. That's what you're paying for mortgage, which is kind of insane in the grand scheme of things of how cheap that is, considering the Bank of England rate is around 5% as well. In fact, it's higher than that at the time of filming this. So if we said we've got a £100,000 property, and what I'm going to put is purchase price, so PP there. So what that means is your deposit is going to equal 25,000. You're going to have some other bits like stamp duty, etc. So let's say that adds up to 10k. It's not the purpose of this video, but just as an example. So that's 35k that you're putting into this 100 grand property in theory. And yet you've got a 100 grand asset. And what that means is that the mortgage, the debt portion of this is going to be 75,000. And it's really important to understand a couple of things with this. Now, number one, let's talk about capital growth again. The long-term average of capital growth per year in the UK is 7.9% growth. Let's just say 5% to make the numbers easy. Well, 5% on top of the 100k means that that property is going up in value by £5,000 every single year. And in fact, it grows because it compounds year on year. And what that means is it grows on the money every single year. So 100k becomes 105, and then it's 5% growth on 105k, and so on and so forth. What we're getting is £5,000 on that 100k. But if you look at it, you're only putting in 35,000. So it's not a 5% return from the capital growth, it's 5,000 on 35,000, which if you work that out is going to be about 14 to 15% return. So you invest 35k and you've made £5,000, which give or take is 13, 14, 15%, right? But that's not all. You've also got your rental income. And this is really important specifically to buy-to-let mortgages because the debt is interest only. Now, interest only debt, when you get money from somebody else, you either pay them back repayment or interest only. Repayment, so if you own your own home, almost definitely it's a repayment mortgage. And what that means is every single month you're paying the interest on what you currently owe, and then you're also paying a little bit down. So at the beginning, let's say I'm paying £1,000 a month and I've got a new mortgage, it's probably about £900 of that is interest, and then I chip away £100 of the capital that I owe. And eventually what happens is that balances out. So next month, for example, I'll still pay £1,000, But I'm now paying £101 of the capital down and £899 in interest. And it goes down and down and down to eventually the last few months, I'm paying £1,000 and 950 of it is capital and £50 is interest because you're paying it down. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, interest only is what it says on the tin. Every single month, all I'm doing is paying that, let's say 5% of that debt. So 5% of an interest-only mortgage, 5% of 75,000 is 3,750. That's how much you need to pay a year, because that interest is annualized, so it's every year. So 3,750. To make this easy, we then make that monthly. So we divide by 12. Now, to make the numbers easy, let's call that £300 a month, because £300 a month would make it 3,600. I guess that extra 150 would be whatever it is, all right? So let's just call it £300 a month. But we're going to pay £300 every single month, but we're not actually paying the capital down. Now, some people get really confused about this because they go, well, hold on a second, what happens in 10 years, 20 years at the end of the mortgage, whenever it is? Well, this is the reason that all of the banks do interest only, because in, let's say, this £100,000 house, and on average, they double every 10 years in value. Well, that 100K property in 10 years' time is now worth 200,000. And I know this baffles people and they're like, no way, are you telling me in X amount of years it'll be worth? Yes, factually, scientifically, numerically, everything you need to know this is true. So that's in 10 years. And it is give or take 10 years, which means in another 10 years, that property is then going to be worth 400,000. Because again, it's doubled from there to there to there. And that's been happening since the Doomsday Book. So it in fact has done it. Now people go, yeah, but it doesn't work like that anymore. Yes, it does. And yes, I get it. £2,000 back 70 years ago is very different to £2,000. But that's what happens with inflation. So buy-to-let properties, they are long-term vehicles, okay? So they are long-term debt. They're very cheap. They're interest only. The downside of buy-to-lets, and not every financing one's going to be this long, by the way, but the downside of buy-to-lets is they're not very flexible. Because there's such low margins in there for them, they have to do millions of loans. Okay, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of loans. So it's very sausage factory. It's very computer says yes, computer says no. So it is in no way a dynamic way of financing a property, but it is incredibly simple. They're not all that long. I wanted to give you some concept. Let's move on to number 2, and this is called bridging. So a bridge is kind of what it says on the tin. This is your situation today. This is the situation you want to get to, and you need something to bridge you from A to B. And it could be from purchase to refinance. It could be you've bought the property and it's an absolute shithole. You need to do it up and you refinance. This is where bridge finance or bridging comes into play. Now, bridging is a short-term product, and it's really important that you understand it is short-term. 12 to 18 months is the most typical. In fact, a majority is actually less than 12 months. So if you said like a 1-year loan is the way to think about this. Now, again, the loan to value, which is how much will they put in versus how much do you put in, is typically 75%. So LTV is what you'll hear it called, loan to value, which means you still need to put in a 25% deposit. Theoretically, the difference is with bridging is actually loan to value. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't a mortgage loan to value? Well, they call it loan to value, but that's not the reality. In fact, a mortgage is loan to purchase price. So let's say that 100 grand property is actually worth 150 grand. But you somehow have got it agreed at 100, which happens, by the way. So you've got 150 grand property agreed at 100,000, which means the lender will only give you £75,000 if it's a mortgage. Well, why? Why would they only give you that if it's worth 150? Because it's not really loan to value, it's loan to purchase. However, with bridging, if you've got that 150 grand property agreed at 100, they will actually give you 100% of the lending. Why? Well, what is 75% of 100 and 50,000. Why did I pick an annoying number like that? It's going to be 75, 105, 112, 500, something like that. So if it's 112, 500, but you're buying it at 100, then they will give you 100% of that. They're not going to give you 112, 500 just because that's 75% of 150. All right, it actually isn't going to be that, but they will loan you 100% of it. So it's true loan to value. So imagine you bought that for 100K, knowing that it's worth 150. You just got it below market value because they needed to complete before Christmas, and it's the 1st of December. Well, you're not going to be able to do that mortgage. But one of the key benefits of bridging is that it is close to cash as it gets. So you can be incredibly quick with this. So 100K, you're going to buy it, and imagine you could buy it 100K and then just list it on Boxing Day, for example, which is a really good day to list properties, or you refinance it. So I might buy it at 100, and then I might get a mortgage broker and start the refinance, and then they will refinance at 75% loan to value, which I think is 112,500, but I might be slightly wrong there. And suddenly, what that means is the 112,500, let's minus any cost just for simplicity, would get debt from the mortgage company into your bank account. Of course, we need to take off the 100 because that's going to pay back the bridging, and you've just got 12.5 grand back in your bank minus any fees, and you own the property. So the main benefits of bridging, kind of self-explanatory. It's fast. It's really flexible, and they are business, entrepreneurial lenders. They want to lend out money. They are aggressive with lending out money. The downside is it's bloody expensive. You can expect 1% per calendar month plus, okay? Every single month it's going to cost you 1%. So it is fast money, quick turnaround. Get in, do what you need to do, and get out. Step number 3, JVs, joint ventures. I really like joint ventures. I'm actually on the other side of joint ventures now. So a joint venture typically involves a couple of parties. This is Pete and this is me over here. Jamie and Peter over here. We're both incredibly happy. I don't know why I look like that, but we are incredibly happy individuals. Now Pete is coming to me and he's going to put in what we call sweat equity. Now, sweat equity essentially means that, look, I don't have the money, but I'm going to work my ass off. I'll find a great deal. I'll do all the work. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to go all in, but I don't have a pot to piss in. Now, I'm in the fortunate position 10 years on into my property journey that I've got an excess of cash, right? We make quite a lot of money in our deal packaging businesses and our education businesses and what we do. So I've got decent funds. So I lend money. Let's say Pete needs 200 grand on this property. So decent property needs 200K. Well, what I'll do is I'll give Pete the 200K. And then let's say the property is a flip. So he does it up and sells it on. And he ends up selling it. Let's say there's no additional cost, just for the example of this, for 250K. So he's made 50,000 in profit. Well, what happens in a typical joint venture is we're going to split that in two. So P is going to get his 25K profit. I'll get my 200K back and I'll make 25K profit as well. Now, the reason I've got quite a unique selling point or a benefit for me is being what I would consider a property professional is I like to think I've got a bit of an inside knowledge on what makes a really good deal or not. So Pete brings me a deal and I typically fund people that are my mentees. So some of you watching this will be in my education programs. And the benefit for me is I've educated the person to a level that I want them to be at. I mentor them quite often going through deals and I get to analyze the deals myself. So I put in the money and we split it 50-50. Now, a joint venture is really beneficial, especially in the first couple of years of your journey, because guess what? Property is fucking expensive. Like, it's really expensive. So in fact, right now, I've been filming videos today and my phone's bloody blowing up and we're trying to move money around all the fucking time. We've completed on over 1 million of property this week and it always feels like this mad rush and turnaround, right? So we make a decent amount of money. We did 10 million last year. Profit of that is about 5.5 million. So you think we're flush with cash all the time. No, because my mentees, the fuckers, like to spend the money, all right? Now the thing is, I can have $1 million in the bank right now. And genuinely, in fact, Dan, my business partner, said this. He was like, you don't realize how quick the money changes. And he used this example. He was like, 3 weeks ago, we had 1.6 million cash in the bank. 3 weeks later, we've got 400,000 in the bank. Now, I know that's a lot of money still, 400K, but 1.2 million just gone like that. So it happens really quickly. So having joint ventures and having access to that capital is really, really powerful. The downside is you're giving away 50%, right? Often, like it's almost always 50%. And the thing is, if you've got an exceptional deal, which obviously is going to get funded, you're going to have to give away a piece of the pie. And the thing is, it can feel a little bit unfair on this side sometimes. And sometimes I think I'm on the easy side of it. But also what I take account of is, it's taken me 10 years of real graft, and it is real graft, to get to this level of financial situation. So it feels really easy for me now because money makes money, right? And now my money makes money. But at the end of the day, I was also on this side with Pete once, where actually I was the person that put in all the sweat equity. And don't get me wrong, I still do. But the exchange of value is this person puts in all of the time, the energy and the resourcefulness, and this person puts their resources at risk. For me, I love joint ventures. I think they're a real win-win, but the only downside is, number one, you're giving away a big piece of the pie. And number two, money can ruin relationships. So I only like doing joint ventures with people I would consider professional. And I've made and lost money joint venturing with people, and it's part of the game. Next, very similar, private financing. Very, very similar to this. These are people that are very similar to me, but they're not really property professionals a lot of the time. Often it's like joint venturing, but just as a straight loan. So what happens is, let's say we go back to that example of me and Pete over here. What happens? Why is Pete so much taller than me? It's probably representative, actually, I'm short ass. But what happens? Why are you laughing like that? So what we do is a 200K loan. So let's keep the numbers the same. But what I might do now is just say, just give me 10% on the money. Now, very simple. I'll give you 200K, you pay me 10% back. So let's say it's a 1-year loan, they're going to give back 220K. Now, clear pros and cons on this. Now, if it was the same deal as before, which remember, he was buying all in at 200K and selling at 250, so he was making, long and short, 50K profit, right? Now, this, in theory, is better for Pete and worse than for me. It depends on your risk appetite here, right? Because if it all goes to plan, now Pete makes his 30K and I make 20K. But the thing is, what if it actually only sells for 240? 250 to 240 is not that big of a jump down, right? Well, now I'm making 20K and Pete's making 20K. What if it sold at 230? What if it went for 230? Or what if it went for 240, but it took another 3 months? So now it's not 10%, is it? Because it's 10% per year. Now he owes me another 2%. You get the gist of it, and this could go all the way. Let me give you an extreme though. Let's say something happened. Pete took too long, really too long. The market took a turn, and now it sold at 210. But he still owes me that 20K plus my 200 that I originally invested, but he sold it at 210. So now he's down £10,000 and needs to find that elsewhere. The benefit is you're paying out a lot less. If everything goes to plan, you're paying out less money, more profit for yourself. The downside is you're also taking the risk on, because what you're saying to somebody is, I'll pay you back this money no matter what happens. So it depends where you're at in your journey, your confidence levels and stuff like that. Honestly, this is not financial advice, but if you're going to take money from private lenders, I would very strongly advise on doing joint ventures. Just my opinion. I shouldn't say the word advice. It is not financial advice. It is just my opinion. I would prefer to give away more of the pie and de-risk myself and jointly benefit and take the risk together, rather than pay out less, give less of the pie away, but take 100% of the risk myself. Your call, just my opinion. Number 5 doesn't really take too much explanation. You can buy it in cash. Shock horror. I don't really like doing this, but saying that, we've got around 2.4 million of property that we currently own in cash. I fucking hate it. And the reason why, by the way, that we own it in cash, despite me hating it, is when we buy deals, it's like somebody will come to, and I'll give you a great example. Somebody came to us last Friday We are filming today, which is Thursday, and we completed on the deal. So what is that? So we come Friday afternoon, so 4.5 days, and we've completed, or technically 4 days because we're halfway through Thursday. So 4 days to complete on it, but we got a ridiculous deal. So we get, because of our positioning in the market, and you will too, you'll get people bringing you crazy deals, but of course, they wait until the last bloody minute. Because in order for you to get a ridiculous deal, the motivation level of the person selling needs to be incredibly high. And then you need to be able to facilitate something outside of being the highest offer. If all they need is to sell it for the highest offer and that's it, they'll just put it on with an estate agent, right? So your value proposition isn't the highest offer. I'm not buying something cash and the highest offer. It's going to be in return for speed, certainty, or something like that. So what we typically do is we buy actually quite a lot in cash, and then we either refinance onto a mortgage or sell it on for a higher price, all right? So I'm not a big fan of it, and the reason for that is because of that capital growth. So maybe I should change it to, I don't like owning something long-term in cash. That's probably a better way of putting it. And the reason for that is if there's a 5% capital growth, and I've got 100 grand property, yes, you could go, yeah, but you don't have costs and running costs and everything like that. So I don't give a shit about the cash flow. Like, me getting a few £100 a month isn't going to change my life in the grand scheme of things. It's the wealth here, right? So in this scenario, I make 5 grand. And yes, you might go, yeah, but you actually get to keep the, I don't know, £3,000 in cash flow. Yeah, but if I own it in mortgage, then I can own 4 properties. So that's 400k worth of value, and 5% of that is 20,000 every single year. And you're right, I might only make £1,000 cash flow now, but I now make £1,000 cash flow times 4, so I make another 4,000. What do you want? 24 grand or 8 grand? You're cool, right? And this is what I really like about it, but there are benefits for cash. So first of all, there are some for religious reasons sometimes, some of the Sharia laws where they don't like interest and things like that. There are some people where they're not allowed to get lending, all right, in the traditional sense. There's also people where it's just not worth the risk. So I've got a decent amount of wealth, right? But I'm also 33 years old and I'm expecting to be in the game for at least double my age, so at least another 30 years of growth. And so I really want to be aggressive and leverage and utilize other people's money. Let's say I had, I don't know, let's say I had £10 million and I am 70 years old. Maybe I actually just want to not have debt, have it paid off and chill out. So for some people, it might be right based on their age and their risk appetite. What I would say, and again, not financial advice, but I would use cash as a tool that is powerful, kind of like the spear when you go fishing rather than the fishing net. It holds so much more power for negotiating. So short term, it's an incredible vehicle. Long term, it's just not for me personally. So I'm going to give you 3 little bonus ones, and I'm going to call it creative. In fact, I'm going to give you 4. So you can have creative finance options, and I'll give you some. So number 1 is LOs. These are lease options. Technically, they're not financing options, but something I'll tell you is you don't need to own the property to get the benefit. You can have a lease option, which gives you the right but not the obligation to buy the property in the future. And often you can get these for as little as £1. Now, you do need to take over the obligations, but you can run it as a buy-to-let or a HMO or whatever agreement that you have, subject to confirmation and acceptance from the mortgage provider here. And all you do is you take over the mortgage payments on a monthly basis, but you don't need to buy it. So let me give you an example. Let's say I agreed to buy this property for 100 grand at any point between now and 10 years. So let's say that property is worth 100k today. Well, based on property doubling every 10 years, what do we think it's going to be worth in 10 years? Will it be worth 200? Who knows? I honestly don't know. I don't have a magic ball, but I can guarantee you it ain't going to be worth 100 grand. It's going to be worth more. So in 10 years, it's worth 200k. Well, what can I do? Well, I can actually do a couple of things. Well, I can then buy it, but now I get... Spell it right, Jamie. I can buy it, B-U-Y, but now it's worth 200. So actually, I'm buying something that's worth 200, but I get to buy it at 100K, and we've gone through some financing options for that. Or, some people don't know this with the lease options, is I can sell it. I don't need to own it. I can just list it online, sell it, and make my 100K. So number one, lease options. Number two, vendor finance. And people get confused with this sometimes. Vendor finance is just because somebody is wanting to sell their property, it doesn't mean that they need the cash. You'll be shocked at how many people just have an asset sat there. So I know a load of people, especially in like the heyday where they're grabbing all these properties, buying them at decent prices, where they've bought something that has development potential, but they've never got round to doing it. In fact, a friend of mine's looking to buy his personal house that he wants to live in. Gorgeous shell of a property, but it's been a shell of a property for about 5 years. And weirdly, the person that owns it owns a development company. They've just been so busy for 5 years, changed the situation and all of that. So you will find people that have an asset, but they don't strictly need the money for it. And developments are really ripe with this. So say, for example, you've got this property and it's got all that land on it there. And let's just say this is a road there all the way down. Well, could you buy some more properties? Don't know why that roof's like that. It's a dodgy one. And why could I buy this and build properties along this road? Yes, sure. So what I could do is I could put a lease option on this property. I'm probably getting a bit too advanced here. And then obviously I'll get planning to build these properties. So I'll go to the local council and go, you call me by building these. They go, yeah. But what if I don't have the money to actually buy this? Because now that it's got planning, it's going to have a huge amount of value. So I might say to the vendor, hey, look, I will give you £1 million for this. Let's say it is £1 million, it's worth it all day long. I'll give you £1 million, but I don't have it. What were you going to do with the money? Not a lot, I was going to keep it there. Oh, great. What were you going to get in the bank? About 5%? Okay, if we agreed that million and I do this development, but I'll pay you 7% on that million until I finish the development and I'll pay you from the profits, would that be agreeable? They go, yeah. So in this example, it's a bit of a bigger example. What I then, let's say this was a 2-year development to make it easy. I end up doing the development with development finance. So development finance funds the development. The vendor keeps hold of it in equity, so doesn't actually get the money, it just sits there. And at the end, I sell the development, pay them back their million, pay them their 7% a year, pay the development finance, and whatever's left is my profit. And actually, probably a bit complex for this video, but I know people that have done £5 million developments and genuinely didn't put in a single pound of their own money and took over £500,000 in profits. And all of it was because the vendor, Jeffrey in this example, and the bank funded the lot of it. So it's a really cool, creative way of doing finance. Next one, very small one, small personal loans. So we covered loans earlier, but you can actually get small pots of money. I'm not a big fan of doing this because when somebody gives you a few £100,000, it's an investment. When somebody gives you 10 grand, it's their life savings, right? But you can technically do it. Now, something you need to be very careful of is you cannot do something called a collective investment scheme. You can't do a CIS. So say this needs 100K putting into it. You cannot go to Dave and get 10K, Sarah get 20K, somebody else get 30. You can't do that sort of grouping together unless these are sophisticated investors, which if they've got 10 grand to invest, they're not. They're not high net worth individuals and they're not sophisticated investors. Easy, you could game the system all you want. So how can you get Dave, Sarah and Pete to invest in this property? Well, what you can do is you can own your company. So I'm going to call it JY Limited. And they can loan money to the company and they can pool it in all of they want. It's not pooled investment. They are loaning it to this company and it is not linked to any property whatsoever. They're just loaning it to me and then I, in that company, can buy the property. So very simple, very effective. It's not my preferred way of doing it, but you can do it. And please talk to an accountant and a solicitor about all of this, guys. This is just my experience and I am not financially qualified to give you financial advice. So it is just my opinion, not my preferred way of doing it, but you can do it in that way. So if you've got a bunch of friends that you want to do it with, you can do this, but please get financial advice before you do this. And finally, a really cool way actually, and this is It's relatively new in property. And when I say new, I say the last couple of years, but it's a really cool way of doing stuff. And it's called crowdfunding. So crowdfunding actually has been around for around a decade now, for businesses, for startup entrepreneurs, all of that. But it started coming into property probably, well, the first one I ever saw was actually about 10 years ago, and it came and then disappeared, right? But the last couple of years, there's some really, really cool crowdfunding platforms where if you've got a great deal, you can list it on the platform, and the way that they make money, give or take, is they'll charge you some sort of admin fee, let's say £1,000 to get it listed if they sign off on it. So say you need that 100K, and then what happens is they will do that collective investment scheme. And some people, depending on the platform, invest 10, 20 grand. Some people on one platform I know invest £500, £1,000 in there. But anyway, it goes into the entity. They charge you whatever, 10%, and then they pay their investors 7%. That is completely made up numbers. But the reason I really like it is I really like the idea that if an investor is going to make money from me, I like the way of smaller investors making money. And this is a really safe way of them doing it. So check them out. House Crowd, guy called Simon Zucci, and he's got a couple of business partners. They're really well known, really friendly. He's a really great guy as well. So House Crowd is probably the one that I'd recommend looking at. But crowdfunding in general is really, really powerful. The reality is, this is a 20-30 minute video trying to share as many as I can. So I've gone through crowdfunding, I've gone through small personal loans, vendor finance, creative lease options in here, buying them cash, buying with bridging, private finance, joint ventures, and of course the boring vanilla buy-to-let interest-only mortgages. There's so many ways of financing deals, and it's really hard to give you personalized advice on this, so I'm trying to be generic. None of this is financial advice. You need to get advice based on your personal situation. But if you're ready to take this forward and actually learn what finance routes are going to be best for you, I'm more than happy to have a chat. And if you want to have a chat with me or the team about where you're at in property and where you want to get to, and maybe we can help you get there, put education in the comments. So literally just put the word education. I'll send you a link. You can book in a free one-to-one strategy session, and I would love to play a part in your journey in 2025 and beyond and really help you get to the next level. I hope this has been valuable. Put education if you want to have a chat. If you're new to the channel, you want to learn more about business, property, finance, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.